Hello, awesome. It's me. It's your old buddy Steve Simonson, and here we are one more time to talk about the world and the world that we live in. Actually, today we're going to talk a very specific part of the world, about a very specific part of the world, and that part of the world is Vietnam. And we're going to talk a little bit today about why I think Vietnam is important and why I believe that it's underutilized and I think in some ways misunderstood about how it fits into the global supply chain. So here we are, everybody. It's time to talk about Vietnam 2023. Now, first, I want to let you know that if you haven't already left a review or subscribed and shared and done all the things that the good awesomers would do, then now's a good time to do that. And I thank you in advance for doing so. So the reason I'm talking about Vietnam is because I have recently decided to take a small cadre of sourcing people to Vietnam to learn how to source in Vietnam. Now, why would Vietnam be the place I take you instead of China? Well, there's one good reason. China remains extraordinarily annoying when it comes to COVID lockdowns. And every time they give a little tiny inch, like, hey, maybe we're gonna change our policy and let it get a little easier on you. Which, by the way, some screenshot of a interdepartment CCP memo saying, maybe we'll open up around the springtime 2023, increase like that got wild, that got loose into the wild, one would say, and the stock market in China was so excited about it, the value went up by $500 billion. So, pardon me, let that sink in just for a minute. The entire stock market value went up by $500 billion on a rumor that was never verified and remains not just unverified, but disputed by the central government. Not just disputed in words like this is not an official policy, stop saying it is, but by their actions as the country of China is continuously and perilously locked down more and more often. Now, you guys, if you've listened for any length of time, you know that my general opinion is COVID, everybody's going to get it, and there's no way to stop it. And it doesn't really matter what you do, we're all going to get it. And the more healthy will have, little to no effect, and the very sick will have terrible, if not catastrophic effect. This is the nature of disease at large, and I am not an epidemiologist, so you can ignore my opinions on this. But I think the evidence is quite clear. I've had COVID, by the way, 3 times, so I at least have that perspective of having the issue, and it's not that I enjoyed it, but I was lucky enough to not suffer significant catastrophic. I was lucky. I was one of the lucky ones. But the truth is, the massive majority of people will come through it. Many of those who've had it never even knew that they had it. They never suffered any ill effects. The challenge in China is when you have just one person who tests positive with tests that are not just not reliable, like super not reliable, you set off this whole series of local governments trying to enforce the will of the central government. And I'm not going to get into all of those details right now, but my whole point is if the local governments get in trouble when they don't fulfill the will of the big guys upstairs, then they kind of overcorrect to make sure that they don't get into trouble. In practical terms, this means that 30% of the Chinese GDP is locked down as we speak right here today. This is going to be released around November, I don't know, end of November, let's say, of 2022. And out of the entire economy in China, roughly 30% of it is locked down right now, which is financially terrible, emotionally terrible. Anybody who oversees or who looks past the kind of mental problems of not just being locked down, but like if you come out, we're coming after you and we're sending you to one of these quarantine camps, nightmare stuff. So anyway, that's a long reason why we're not going to China. why are we going to Vietnam? Well, we're going to Vietnam because it is and has been one of the key places that China production has moved because of the proximity, because of kind of existing relationships between China and Vietnam, which, by the way, for those keeping score at home, everybody thinks that they're old buddies and pals, but they are not as close as you might think, despite both having, kind of red flags. And I'm not going to get too deep into it, but don't forget at the end of the 70s, China and Vietnam actually went to war. And there are not awesome vibes on both sides of that border. Again, that doesn't mean they can't do business, but it is not like a super chummy relationship. That's the point I'm getting to. So, by the way, if you want to figure out what I'm talking about, you can go to catalyst88.com right now and find the 2023 Sourcing with Steve trip, and you can see the details of how we're putting this trip together. Now, I do want to say right up front that I don't do these as a profit center. Essentially, we do these on, what I call the entrepreneurial travel club. This is just me making up marketing terms, I guess. But essentially, we figure out what's the cost of the 5-star rooms and the really best hotels. What's the cost of some of the meals and the cost of my staff getting over there and having their stuff covered, even my hotel covered. And how do I make sure I come out of this without me losing money? That's essentially my approach to this thing. To the extent there's a couple bucks left over, I'm not going to be heartbroken about it, but this is not a for-profit kind of concept. This is a knowledge transfer kind of concept. And to that end, I don't want 50 people on this trip. I don't even want 30 people. We'll probably cap this below 20 people. So we've basically priced it based on those early adopters. And we've said, I'll explain what the trip here is in a minute, but basically the first wave of people, those early adopters, you get the lowest price. And then I have added additional prices, in part because we think the cost might go up, but also just to say, hey, listen, early adopters get the best deal, and those who come later pay a little bit more. C'est la vie, such is life, as they say. So the why of go to Vietnam is really important. We've been buying in Vietnam for some period of time, that period of time being 4 or 5 years. I was last in Vietnam in 2019, the summer of 2019. I will probably go there, if not before the April trip. It's possible I may dip in there before the April trip, but if not, then it'll be me and you going together for my first time since 2019. The great news is we're going to a trade show that is there. And this particular Vietnam Expo will have hundreds and hundreds of exhibitors, not all of which will be directly relevant to your product. In fact, Vietnam at large is not a replacement for China. How could it be? They have, 120 million people roughly. You can't replace 1.2 billion people of production and capacity and kind of breadth of resources with a 10 times smaller population. So there's some things that Vietnam is more capable of doing immediately and today, and other things that it's kind of phasing into. The good news for you is there's still a high potential, particularly in their areas of strengths, but even in the emerging areas. So a lot of people don't realize that, electronics is something that is like the number 4 or 5 export from Vietnam, especially if you take out food. It's in the top 5 for sure if you take out food items. And I don't do food, so to me, it's not relevant to look at food in those export rankings. Vietnam's really good at textiles. Vietnam's really good at kind of leather and shoes and any kind of offsets that would be, made of those types of products. So when you hear textiles, if you say, well, gosh, I make whatever draperies or pillows or, sheets or pillowcases or, that may be attractive to you, but textiles also means heavy textiles like backpacks or, other complex things, tents, all kinds of things, sleeping bags. there's a whole camping and outdoor kind of genre there. There's many things in shoes. I'm not a shoe guy personally, but they do a ton of shoes. So any of those industries related to those make it, much easier to kind of deal with. So, if somebody makes shoes, they probably know how to deal with leather. And somebody makes shoes, they probably know how to deal with snaps and ties and, the different components that might be in shoes. So maybe they can make a wallet really easy, or maybe they can make these other similar components. And maybe they're already making those. But part of it is that Vietnam is being sought after so much that there's a lot of drain on the labor sector there. In other words, as new money comes in, people trying to replace production in China, the industries that pay the most will attract the most workers. So there's a lot of this push and pull for some of the best workforces. What does that mean to you and me? Ultimately, it means as the dynamic situation unfolds, we will react accordingly. So by going to a trade show, you're already in front of factories who want to talk to you. More so, we're not just going to, put you on the ground and prepare for the trade show. We're going to make sure that you get the chance to talk to a couple experienced trading companies and sourcing agents that allow you to maybe delegate some of your day-to-day sourcing and work that may have otherwise fallen either onto you or fallen away completely, like nobody's doing it, which is not a great outcome. We could talk later about the value of a sourcing company and a trading company in these concepts. And I have talked about that to some extent last time. Anybody who's like, I never would use a sourcing agent, I would never use a trading company, I always have to buy from the factory. Well, frankly, you don't know what you're talking about. Now, there are times where I will not use a trading company, but the contextual elements of that are so critical. There are other times I only want to use a trading company, or in fact, I have to use a trading company because this particular factory that I found that I think is really valuable and makes a product just the way I want it has no export license. So the best thing to do is, for a small fee and some responsibilities, throw the trading company a little Scooby snack and let them kind of manage that process. So as part of my, we'll call it retirement 2.0 operating, I'm going to focus on these knowledge share, knowledge transfer kinds of businesses. So my fundamental way I'm looking at this trip is we're going to, you have to fly yourself basically to Hanoi. You'll land on the ground. We'll pick you up and we'll take you to our hotel. It'll be like a little protective bubble for you. And we will each night have like a mini mastermind where the first night, for example, we'll tee up. Hey, you're going to the trade show tomorrow. You should, think about asking these types of questions. And as you hear the responses, start to categorize these prospects into different buckets, from they're not viable to maybe we should pursue this. The second night, so you'll dispatch yourself to the trade show, which is a couple miles away from the hotel we've selected. You'll enjoy your day. We'll arrange for you to have a translator. You pay them a little Scooby snack each day in cash. And you start to build a little bit of a rapport there. And you come back at the end of the night and everybody will compare notes. And they go, well, Steve, this supplier said this, or this supplier said that. And I'll have some other experts throughout the trip in and out that will also be able to lend a hand. And we'll all back and forth this stuff, as I like to call, we'll ham and egg it. You say, I experienced this and I'm really excited. And I say, whoa, pump the brakes. I'm nervous about this thing I heard. Or you may say, I'm really nervous. I'm, very concerned about this. And I'll say, oh, that sounds really good to me. And here's why. So it's a real, it's an informal way, yet in a structured concept for us to basically go through the day, and everybody gets to learn from each other and share their wins and share their losses. And the same thing will happen the next successive, few days. By the end of the week, we'll be there about a week, you should either start setting up times to go visit these factories, assuming they're close by, or perhaps, you set up some subsequent time or even an online visit or something. But I would highly recommend, before we wrap up the trip, that you see if you can get some local factory visits in. So the first couple, maybe say 2-3 days, you want to stay focused on the trade show, prospecting as much as you can. Again, there's expected to be, over 500 different vendors from many different categories, some not relevant to you at all. Like you're probably not going to buy manufacturing equipment. Maybe you are. I know plenty of entrepreneurs who have their own manufacturing. And so if you're into various, manufacturing techniques, this may be a place for you. I don't think that they're overweighted in equipment. So I think it's more appropriate for consumer product sellers. And then as you move through the week, you will find a little bit more time to be precise and either have follow-up meetings back at the expo center or even at the hotel. Start to build a little rapport with a potential supplier or a potential trading company or a potential sourcing agent. The point is you're building the basis of future relationships. Now, I will just tell you, we're going to stay in Hanoi the whole time. The expo is right in Hanoi. It's a nice city to explore, and there's many local sights and sounds. We'll take you to dinner a couple nights, not every night. It's it's not hard to go to dinner, by the way. But I know how it is when you come back from the show. We'll do our informal mastermind in the lounge level, and we'll talk all that stuff out. And then some of us will just simply be tired. Particularly you guys, if you're on the trade show floor all day, you'll be really, really tired. And so the first night or two, you may want to just dispatch yourself and get off to bed and stay focused on the two things that I think are so important when you're doing these trips. You got to eat, you got to sleep. And that eating is your fuel, and it gives you, you got to eat right. And then you got to sleep, because if you try to burn the candle at both ends, you are going to get completely upside down time zone wise. And I'll share tips with the attendees later on how to beat jet lag and those types of things. So then we'll go on to some nice dinners. I mean, really world-class dinners. And on the last day, we'll also take you out for some sightseeing around Hanoi, some enjoyable things. Again, all of us are kind of there together. It's almost like a collegial atmosphere where we're able to share and learn together. And no doubt relationships start to form and we have good times. And so just having a day where everybody can just kind of relax and go, you know what? I don't have to worry about anything. Steve and the gang are taking care of a nice little day out on the town, and I get a little culture, I get a little sightseeing, and you don't have to worry about any of those details. We take care of all that, and it'll be baked into the admission price anyway. And then again, fundamentally, you'll dispatch yourself from Vietnam back to wherever you go. So you will fly yourself into Hanoi and out of Hanoi, and most everything else, including the hotel, we will take care of. Our objective is so that you have very little out of pocket. The only things you really have to bring some money for is maybe lunch at the trade show center, think of, maybe $10 a day, and a translator day to day. I'm going to assume you'll need a translator, and we'll help connect you to the translator so you don't have to worry too much about that. And then you'll just pay them in cash each day. It could be between 50 and 100 US dollars. The rate fluctuates based on the demand, but because the Vietnam Expo is a pretty well-known show, the demand may be somewhat high. Therefore, we want to pay near the going rate, if not the going rate, because we want really good translators and not get leftovers from people who know what they're doing. So this is Training Wheels, Sourcing with Steve Training Wheels. And so if you've never been, you can go with us. If you have already been an expert, and maybe you're an expert in China and you're trying to move some of your stuff, you're welcome to go too, because we've got the capabilities and knowledge to help you with that. And if you are an expert, you're welcome to come along too, because not only do I think you have the opportunity to learn, but you can help some of the others who are on the trip as well. Because we do this in a very, let's say, not a productized way. Like I've done, sourcing with Steve trips since, as I said, roughly 2002, 20 years, where I've taken people overseas to various places, sometimes just in America. We've gotten to many American factories, Canadian factories, literally I've been all over the world in various sourcing. And I think the skills are really, really important, and they apply to other markets as well. So, if you're still sourcing in China, fine, I still do too. These lessons will apply to you. If you're sourcing in India or elsewhere, doesn't matter, Mexico, US, Canada, UK, Germany, all of these lessons will apply. It's just we're going to practically see them in action inside Vietnam during that trip. So, what does this mean to you? It means if you are interested in going to Vietnam with old Steve, get on over to Catalyst 88, look up the trip. It's should be in the menu area. Sourcing with Steve, April 2023. Look through all the details. We've got a page that shows what's included, what's not included, and if you are ready, then go ahead and book that trip. Like, I want to remind you that, like, we're paying for your hotels, we're paying for the bulk of your food. The hotels will include obviously wonderful breakfast buffets and evening hors d'oeuvres and drinks and things like that. We're buying the really expensive rooms because we just want to have everything baked into the cake. Now, could we do this cheaper? Yeah, we could do it a lot cheaper. I can find hotel rooms for less than $30 a night in Hanoi, even during the trade show. They will be more rustic. It's a different experience. And my purpose for this trip is not to focus on the cheapest price. It's to focus on having a nice, high protective, comfortable bubble for you. Now, I do want to just say very briefly that if the cost of the trip, I think the cost of the trip's around $5,000. That's kind of our baseline, and then it will increase with the next waves. By the way, once the first 5 are sold out, the price goes up. If you can't afford to be on this trip, don't come. That's really part of the reason why we set the bar so high with the executive lounge and so forth. If you're not prepared at this scale to invest, then this trip is not for you. And it's not me being mean. It's me saying I want a very qualified audience to be there, because they are the ones who are able to maximize the lessons and maximize the experiences. And this is really important to me, because as I focus on trying to figure out how to help others, raise their business up and be able to hire more people and be able to do things at a higher and higher scale, I want to make sure that the time that I spend and the knowledge that I try to impart, or at least share my experiences, both good and bad, finds its home to the most places that it's most applicable. And I hope that makes sense to you. So Vietnam 2023, everybody, come and join me if you wish. And if not, that's okay too. We'll try to keep you posted on various sourcing things here and there. There are plenty of other places we do sourcing. But for this one, we're going to focus on Vietnam 2023. Thanks again, everybody. Go be awesomer.